The confession tapes is not at all what I expected. I thoroughly enjoyed it still, but I became very enraged when watching this for several reasons, and I thoroughly recommend you do watch it, but just be prepared that it's going to really mess with your emotions. So I'm not going to give you any spoilers about the cases specifically. I do want to talk a little bit about the first case. Not in too much detail though, so don't worry if you haven't seen it, but then I'll kind of give a generic overview of what the other cases are like and what you can expect. So this is, as I said, on Netflix. This is actually from the production company A24, directed by Kelly Loudenberg. I don't know if that's the entire series or not. And this first was released in 2017. There are 2 seasons. And the first episode is a bit of a red herring as to what this is about. So what it's actually about is about it looks at actual tapes, audio, video footage of people admitting to crimes they did not commit. And most of these, I think maybe all of them off the top of my head, were murders. They're very brutal, nasty crimes. And it looks at people who have been forced by the police to admit to something they haven't done. And that's difficult to watch. So I'll talk about that more in a moment and why it enraged me and what confuses me and also what I really liked about it. But I just want to mention the first episode. The first episode is actually brilliant, but it's a bit of an anomaly. This looks at quite a high profile, quite infamous case now where 2 teenagers murdered one of the boys' families, and then they ran away to Canada, and then they used the Mr. Big operation, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's a process that's illegal in Canada and a couple of other countries where police officers and detectives can disguise themselves as Mr. Bigs, as drug lords, big hard men, if you like, and kind of encourage these boys to confess to these crimes, and then they get it on camera, and then it's a confession. It's not legal in America or the UK. And that's what that first episode is. It shows us this Mr. Big case and how it worked. Really fascinating, fantastic to watch. But these boys did commit that crime. The rest of the episodes, there are 6 other episodes in the first season, and I think 4 in the second. They're all about people who confessed to crimes they did not commit. Now, I would like to think that I would never give a false confession. And I think everybody in this would like to think they never gave a false confession. So why then do we have all of these clips of people confessing to things they didn't do? Now, in one of them, there is a person who has a slightly lower mental age, and I can kind of understand why he would have confessed, because he wouldn't have really understood the gravitas of the situation. But and there's also maybe a mother who confessed to a crime, but she never really confessed. She kind of just said, well, maybe what you're saying could be right, but I don't remember it. But there were some people who outright went into a lot of detail about what they did and how they committed these crimes, even though they never did and they were nowhere there, and there's actual serious evidence, or they have a strong alibi to suggest otherwise. There was one instance where somebody was like, before he confessed, he was saying, well, test the DNA, you will see it's not mine. And the police officers were just saying, well, we don't need to test the DNA because we know it will be yours. And that's so frustrating. Now, I don't know whether they did go and test the DNA in the end, or if they didn't and they just took this person's confession, because usually when somebody confesses and you had them as a suspect anyway, you're going to take it as fact. If somebody confesses and you didn't think they were there, that's usually investigated further. But these people are committing these false confessions, and that infuriates me. What does infuriate me the most is that I have a strong love for law enforcement. Specifically British law enforcement. These are all American, apart from the Canada one. So it's not quite the same. I'm not, I don't feel any less love to the British police force. But it does make me question some of their tactics and why a lot of them felt like it was okay to do that. I will say a lot of the cases were in the south. Not all of them. I don't know if there's maybe a slightly looser moral for sheriffs and detectives in the south. I'm not sure. But it is heartbreaking for two reasons. One, they're being very nasty, very self-assured, very self-righteous, and trying to get this person, these innocent people, to confess to this crime. But second of all, they're happily letting people on the street, the real killers, just wander around because it makes their lives easier to just get this random person who may or may not have even been anywhere near there to confess to this crime. So it's really irresponsible. Not only is it selfish and exceptionally unfair to the people who are going to be, trialed and inevitably most of the time found guilty for this, it's leaving the real murderers loose to commit more crimes, and that to me is the antithesis of what the police force is supposed to do. So I don't understand why they ever would have thought this was acceptable, and that's what really angers me. I wish the series had gone into a little bit more about the psychology of why people confess to things they didn't do. It does touch upon it. It does look into kind of the pressures one feels, things where if they're told, if you confess to this, we'll let you go home. And people may think, fine, I'll just tell them what they want to hear, I'll go home, I'll get a good lawyer, I won't be found guilty. But it doesn't work like that. But I would have liked to have known a little bit more about the psychology behind it. And also, I would have particularly loved to know what happened to all of these police officers. Because obviously since this documentary's been made, we know that these certain officers were being coercive in trying to get these false confessions. So were they struck off? Are they still practicing? I really hope not. Some of these cases are quite old. And some of the sheriffs were also quite old. So I'm, fingers crossed not. One could also argue that in some of these cases, the defendant may actually have been the murderer. That could be argued. But a lot of the time it was proven in the episode that it definitely wasn't the case. I do have to say, the case with the mother and her daughter, I won't say any more, but I think she was innocent. I completely think it was the daughter. 100% believe that. And I don't know why they didn't believe that. But, there we go. What are you going to do about it? Unfortunately, the majority of us are very powerless and we cannot do anything. And that's very frustrating, especially as I'm in the UK. I can't do anything overseas. I do recommend you watch the confession tapes. It's heartbreaking at times. There are some that are a little questionable where I think, well, actually, maybe they could have done it. There's no solid evidence either way. But there are several cases where it's 100% clear that they did not do it. There are things the police did not look into, things that they purposefully ignored. And that's very annoying. But at the same time, thoroughly enjoyable. So it's a very warped emotional journey, but I promise you'll thoroughly enjoy it. The entire thing is on Netflix just now. Definitely give it a go.